SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. Today under physical method we will be talking about the assessment of levels of musculoskeletal injuries or the probabilities and how do we assess it. So in this particular section what we will do, we will majorly understand the injuries and we will try to understand through checklist how do we assess them. Okay. So let us know that what are the tools we are going to learn over here. So methods which can be used to assess the levels of musculoskeletal discomfort among the workers, we will try to understand that. So from here we will be able to get an idea that what is the kind of body parts, what are the varieties of body parts right now having any kind of musculoskeletal discomfort which may lead to musculoskeletal disorder. So mainly we will be talking about, so there are varieties of tool, however we will be taking those tools which is commonly used, right. So we will be talking about PLIBEL, very easy, very old tool and commonly used, it is a kind of checklist. Okay. So we will understand that. We will talk about NIOSH discomfort survey. So it is again a very popular tool, and Dutch musculoskeletal survey, DMS. Okay. So in today's class initially we will be discussing the PLIBEL technique. Okay. So let us begin with PLIBEL. So this particular method is assigned for identification the ergonomics hazard, and we will try to, from this particular checklist we will try to understand if your infected body region is something like maybe shoulder or maybe neck or maybe lower back or leg somewhere, what are the varieties of probable reasons are there, and then it will help us to get a direction that to identify what are the causal factors of it. So it's very initial tool, initial method which we will implement at the very beginning of our study. So let us begin. So it's a very simple checklist, it is a screening tool. Okay. So it is a screening tool, you will not get any kind of indexing over here, you will understand only the through screening you will understand what are the varieties of body parts which is having problem and what are the probable causal factors associated with that in the workplace or workstation. So the list made this, it's a checklist. So this particular list is made by in 1987. Of course, this particular group of people like Kemlert and Kilbom, they are continuously working on this field, and there are a lot of further development also happened. So the method for the identification of musculoskeletal stress factors which may have injurious effect, that we will try to get from this particular checklist. This will further highlight the musculoskeletal risks in connection with workplace investigation. So as I mentioned, we will also get an idea what are the causal issues available in that particular region. So we will be considering the modifying factor, that is the time, environment and organization. So these are the modifying factors will be there which we will take in consideration. So if we look at we will definitely show you the checklist in total. So here I would like to mention these are the 5 body parts, okay, neck, shoulder, upper back and upper part of your back. So this whole region, neck, shoulder and upper from back side, upper part of your back, that is one region. Elbows, forearm of both hands is another region, both feet another region, knees and hips, okay, so that is another part. So lower and upper and lower back, that will have another region. So these things are directly taken from the actual tool, okay. So the items that checked in the workplace assessment of ergonomics hazard, and these are the body regions which we are going to check through this particular tool. So let us know little more about this particular technique or particular tool. The list of the item consists of questions concerning the awkward posture, tiresome work movement. So if something is happening very tiring, so we will come to know about that as well. Poor design of tool or workplace and stressful environment or organizational condition. To use this pliable technique, the injured body regions need to be located first. So you have to have a body map from where we need to understand what are the injured area or discomfort, the person where the person is finding discomfort. So after that, the white field, so we will show you the checklist, then you will understand what is that white field. White field on the left hand side of the table of the form are checked according to the questions and injured body region of the individual worker, that I am going to show you in the actual checklist. So when a question is irrelevant to certain body region and if documentation has not been found in literature, then represented by a gray area or gray field in this particular checklist. You will see the checklist, then only you can understand, and you need not to answer for that particular gray area. So in the whole checklist there are some white area, there are some gray area. So for gray area already it has been evaluated that those need not to be answered, only white portion need to be answered. So I will show you the checklist. So a workplace assessment using the pliable starts with a preliminary observation and introductory interview with the employee. So it's not that you go and start taking the observation. First you have to have some kind of interaction with the employee. So here I will give you one more, I already discussed it in some other classes, that whenever we are taking feedback, questionnaire or some relevant information from the operator, you have to keep that in mind. You have to have their consent to do or to conduct this study. That is the ethical requirement. So every institution will normally have their ethical board, institutional ethical board, before you start any kind of human study. Even if it is questionnaire, even it is not invasive procedure, still you need to declare that what you are going to do with those information and how you are going to use it for your academic and research purpose. Individual information should not be public, that also you need to declare. Once you write that declaration form, then you should get the consent from the participant. That is the procedure you should follow. So in this case also Before you start the experiment, you should get the signed informed consent from each participant. So, the tasks that are conducted for most of the working hours, suppose they are working from starting from 8 o'clock in the mornings, okay, and they are finishing it maybe in the afternoon. So, these 8 hours you have to do the study. So, based on the study objective, you will decide when and how you are going to collect the information and collect the data. The task that the worker and the observer looks upon as particularly stressful to the musculoskeletal system, that you are going to assess. So, here the opinion from the stakeholders are very, very important. Here the stakeholders are the operator or the worker who are working in that particular situation. So, stakeholders information, stakeholders input is very important in this particular technique. Thus, several pliable form you need to fill for each employee. Maybe for an employee there are 5 tasks or 7 tasks or 7 job which is difficult and they reported, yes, this is this. Then you have to have 5 or 6 depending on the number of indication, you have to complete it for that single particular individual worker. Okay. So, definitely there will be suppose 10 employees and each employee must have indicated, some employee 5 job, some employee 4 jobs, or some maybe 1 or 2. Okay. So, for each depending on their input, depending the stakeholders information, you have to fill individual pliable form. You cannot mix them, it is not required, it is not possible, then it will hamper your data collection. So, depending on the employee and depending on the job that is being identified, that particular worker, you have to fill the pliable form. Okay. So, this is very important to mention and important to follow during data collection. Also, we can say this is an introductory interview you need to be done with the employees, because if the employee or the operator doesn't understand what is the requirement of this pliable checklist, they will not be able to contribute. So, initial interview need to be done to understand what are the major exposed body parts. The preliminary observation need to be done in that particular workplace. It is not that you come back to another place and take the interview. It is always suggested that you conduct the interview at the same place where the work is being carried out. Now, there may be a question, some workplaces are really dangerous and you need maybe the different kind of safety gear while working. So, those cases, based on the scenario, based on the situation, you have to take decision. Now, these decisions are always based on your experience. So, it is advised that you take help in those cases from your expert person who is available over there. So, it is always suggested you take the interviews at the same workplace. However, if there is something, some safety issues or hazardous issues are there and you really cannot enter those, some restricted area or something, in that cases, based on the scenario, based on the context, you take the decision. Of course, that decision should be associated with your aim and objective of the study. So, the assessment whatever we are going to do through pliable are focused on 2 major things. What are these? The tasks that are conducted for most of the working hours, that need to be there. It is not that once in a while that task is being carried out and you are doing the assessment for it. or maybe in a whole day shift it is 1. No, not for those cases. Only if the task is being carried out or conducted by the workers in most of the working hours, then those tasks need to be selected. The second is the task that the worker and the observer look upon as particularly stressful to the musculoskeletal system, then only you choose the task. So, initial observation, initial interview, that is very important and impacting factor of this particular checklist, and that will actually give you some impact in the result of the PLIBEL. Okay. So, these two considerations need to be there. First, which task you are conducting for most of the hours of your working hour, that task, and from the preliminary observation, if you find that particular some task which is creating, which is you find it is stressful to the musculoskeletal system, then only you choose that particular task. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, that several PLIBEL forms have to be filled for each employee, that I mentioned earlier as well. Now, if we come to the the procedure, this is like this particular slide is explaining that. So, let us understand it. So, the major bullet points are the major steps and sub bullets are also there. So, let us go one by one. So, after observing the ergonomics hazard, what you are going to do with that? So, what you have to do? You have to number the area on the form is checked or the short note need to be made. So, once you look at the form, you will understand that. Okay. So, what are the areas need to be worked on or need to be checked further? You have to tick it. Either you tick them or you keep a short note. Then, in the concluding report, the crude dichotomous answers are arranged in order of importance, and the answers are collected from the list of ergonomics hazards that can be also used. In summary, what you are going to do? The problems are described in the combination of the answers taken from the list and in modifying sector. So, you have first the observation, then conclusion, then you have to write the summary, and there is one more option where you can modify it. So, modifying factors for concluding report can also be considered, or which is influenced by the duration of task. Of course, if the duration of task is more, it has more impact, and the quantities of environment or organizational factors. So, duration of task and organizational and environmental factors also can be used as a modifying factors. Okay. So, let us start with the understanding how this checklist look like. This is the whole checklist. Okay, this particular checklist has been adapted for this particular presentation from this particular author's, it's a textbook. From here we adapted this particular figure. However, this table is also available in the original publication of this particular tool. Okay. Now, let us understand it. So, we discussed about these figures, right? So, first figure talks about neck, shoulder and upper part of your back, elbow, forearm and hands, that is the second. Then feet and knees and hips, this part, and lower back. So, these are the major 5 region. So, here is very important thing is, so these are some gray area. First, let us understand the gray areas in this form. So, gray, wherever these gray areas are, you need not to worry about it. Only your concerns are these white areas. Okay, see, you have numbering. So these are the white areas what you need to answer. Now here are the list of factors. So we have total 17 factors. For each body part, for each portion or identified portion, you can have all the combination of these 17 factors. Okay. So I will give example of the first portion. Okay. Suppose you can understand that first question is not required for you to get information because it's a gray area. What it says is the walking surface uneven, sloping, slippery or non-resilient. Okay, so what does this mean? Of course, if that is the question, your upper back, neck, shoulder is nowhere connected, so you need not to answer for it. Whereas the second question, it says that is this space too limited for work movement or work maintenance? Of course, in that case your neck, shoulder and upper back is connected. Suppose you are in a confined zone, you have lot of restriction in the body movement where you can have an answer yes or no. So all are dichotomous, okay. So either yes or no, so only yes no situation. So for this particular portion you can have answer, you can read these questions in detail thoroughly before you go for the interview. Also, see, this particular figure helps you in understanding that where you should get answer, where you should not get answer. So all gray areas you need not to bother, that has been decided or priorly identified that these are not relevant to these kind of questions, whereas the only white areas are need to be answered and need to be answered only from these questions, not from anywhere else. Okay. So if you look at the first segment, you need to answer only question number 2, 3, 4, 5, then there is a long gap like 6, 7, 8 you need not to answer, whereas again you will be answering for 9 A, B, C, D, 10 A, B, C, D, 11 A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the portions, then 14, 15 and 16, again 17 is not required for first part. Okay. Why? Let us read the 17. 17 is saying is reprised work, whatever the work they are doing with forearm and hand performed with twisting movement or uncomfortable hand position. So of course that is not going to affect your neck, shoulder and upper back. So that is quite irrelevant for the first part of your body. Okay. So this way what you need to do, you need to get an answer for yes, no. Yes, no. Okay. All dichotomous answer. So this is the checklist. This is the PLIBEL checklist. And how do you use it? Suppose you have the data. Okay. So you have the data, you have filled for one employee, you have 5 jobs or 5 tasks you have identified, and for each task you have one PLIBEL worksheet. Okay. You have filled worksheet. Now what you are going to do with this? What is the kind of interpretation we'll have? Now you have one employee, you have maybe another 50 employees. For each employees such task somewhere will be connected. Then you need to see how many said these factors are responsible to cause the problem. Then you will get an understanding that what is the major causal factors to have those problems. So, percentage you can calculate. Also you can go for any other analytical statistics where dichotomous variables are in use. That is also possible. So, you need to check what is your objective and how do you analyze this particular data. So, here the very important thing, you will get some direction that if there is a problem or discomfort in this particular body part, these are the probable causal factor. It is not that confirmatory test, okay. It is not confirmed. It is only going to give you a direction, okay. So, once you get the direction, you have to investigate more. Once you investigate more, probably you will get the confirmatory result. Yes, this is the causal factor, and then only you can modify it and get better result. Okay. So, this is the checklist, and you understood that how you are going to use this particular checklist. It is a very primitive tool, however, it is very effective tool. Now, let us understand what are the advantages of this particular tool. It is a general assessment method. So, learning is very easy. I understand by this time you understood this particular tool. If you have a printout of this particular checklist, you can easily start collecting data. It is very easy technique. So, it observed the part, the whole or the body, and summarizes the actual identification of ergonomics hazards in a few sentences. So, you have some, so these are all detailed sentence, right. So, everywhere. So, you can really understand where the hazards are. Simple and designed for primary checking, as I mentioned earlier also. An initial investigative method for workplace observer and identify ergonomics hazards. It can be supplemented by other measurements, for instance weight and time, questions and observation from other studies. Of course, the organizational factors need to be considered if you need to go for more detail. Time of exposure. So, these you can add as per your requirement. So, it is very easy technique, but there are some disadvantages. So, it is not intended to any specific occupational task, not any specific. So, you can have general statement. Many other methods are intended for specific occupation or body region. So, for this case it is a very generic, very general. So, you may not have specific indication, and they can also record more detailed answer. Here it is not detailed answer, only you understand risk factor is there or not, and that too the participatory responses, so subjective responses. So, here you need to be very careful that how do you consider those results. Okay. So, if you are expert in collecting such information, collecting such using such tool, you will get very good result. However, if the person is not that expert in that particular field, may have some kind of wrong information as well. So, experiencing it very important. So, we need to follow some standards and regulation. So, an ergonomic screening tool for assessment of ergonomics condition at workplace has been suggested as a feasible instrument by many other researchers for this particular tool. It is valuable to have a systemic assessment method when doing follow-ups and when analyzing how intervention after the onset of occupational musculoskeletal injuries could be made more effective. So, you have before data, you have after data, and you can really compare it. That is that. So, if number of yes is very high, okay, most of the question is on that side. So, of course, it is not all similar. Still, if you have more difficulties, your number of yes are more, okay. So, then you can compare and you can really have a good understanding what is the impact of that particular intervention. So, PLIBEL follows the standard and regulation of the day, and although it is a self-explanatory subjective assessment method and registering only at the dichotomous level. So, you have no difficulties. It requires a solid understanding of ergonomics. This is very important. It is not that anybody and everybody can use it. You need to know the basic fundamentals of ergonomics, okay. Without that, we will not be able to use it. To use this particular method, it needs some kind of skill, and a certain degree of practice is firmly recommended. So, before you go for actual data collection, for many other tools also, I always suggest that you go for some pilot data, okay. So, pilot test. So, if you do that successfully, of course, you are ready to collect bigger chunk of data. So, you can increase your sample size. So, training already we discussed. For tools, what do you need? You need only pencil, paper, folded ruler and some camera to capture that particular task. Otherwise, you will not be able to collect the correct information. There will be, because number of data is very high, right. So, later in the laboratory when you come for your analysis, that may create confusion or difficulties, okay. So, that is all for this PLIBEL technique. I suggest you take print out, it is easily available. The original paper is also available in the internet. So, you please collect the original publication, you get the data sheet and you may practice it by yourself, and if you find any difficulties, we can definitely discuss it in the discussion forum. Thank you.